emotionally affected by the terrorist attacks on the city of Paris over the weekend. The Story Bridge, the Brisbane Wheel, City Hall and various other landmarks have been highlighting the French tricolour blue, white and red since the attacks in a show of solidarity. But terrorism acts happen every day around the world. For some reason, the Paris attacks really resonated so deeply that some think tanks say the real question is for us and what are our values. Mal Fletcher is an Australian futurist and social commentator from a London think tank called 2020 Plus. Mal Fletcher, why do the attacks in Paris give us pause for thought?
I think it's worth reflecting on the fact that civilization is a very fragile thing. Sometimes we live in our world of the advantages of urbanisation and digitisation, and we sort of come to think at times that our security is inviolable, that it can't possibly be invaded. And these sorts of things remind us that, in fact, civilization is a very frail thing at times and something we need to guard, something we need to protect.
So we like to think, or we have this feeling that we can isolate ourselves in the modern era, but this shows that we cannot.
No, we can't. And, of course, the process of digitisation, for all of its benefits, like innovation across vast distances, does often tend to lead us to live in little isolated bubbles. And I think what this reminds us of is the importance of social engagement, being involved in the world we live in. I think, hopefully, on a personal level, there'll also be a deeper resolve to treasure the freedoms that millions of men and women in two world wars actually died to preserve for us. And I think for some of us, I would put myself uppermost in this case, we do need to recommit to engaging with our world wherever we can. I mean both the everyday world with all of its mundane problems and the much bigger world, the less attractive or comprehensible political world around about us. So I think there's a challenge here just for us to remember that civilization is fragile. We need to engage wherever we can.
So how do we not value or treasure the freedoms that people fought for in the previous two world wars and perhaps others as well?
Well, I don't think it's a case of deliberately failing or ignoring the sacrifice of these people. I think what happens, though, is we just get into life. It's natural. It's human response to reality. We just get into life. We go along with the flow. And as I say, we become, in our digitized, urbanized age, very isolated from one another. And what this is doing in Paris, of course, is causing people to pull together. It's wonderful, actually, to see the human response of people within Paris in all of the news reports, people working together to help each other. The same thing happened here in London during 7/7 a few years ago, as did 9/11 in the United States, people working together. And whilst, as I said, we don't tend to see positive things coming from terror attacks, we do have to make from them what we can. And one positive thing is to celebrate that engagement. So I don't think we deliberately take for granted what people sacrifice to give us, but I think sometimes we just forget how fragile things really can be.
Can I ask you, Mal Fletcher, why do you think this incident in Paris has resonated so deeply, apparently around the world? Is it because Paris is a global city, or is it something else? Because there have been attacks in numerous cities on a weekly basis in a whole lot of countries around the world.
Yes, they have. I think, though, when it happens in a centre like Paris, and the same was true in London, the same was true in New York, you're talking about cities that are well known as cities of freedom, cities of civilization and art and culture. I think Paris in particular strikes a chord in that regard when it comes to Europe. It is a centre of art and culture. And this is not the sort of thing that one would normally expect to be happening in somewhere like Paris. But of course, it's really coming home to us, as I said before, that these things can happen anywhere. And there's one other point, Steve, I think is important. In a culture where we increasingly celebrate what I would call a victim mentality on all sorts of issues, I think it's worth remembering in cases like this, these are real victims. These are people that really have been victimized. And some, perhaps others in our culture who like to think themselves victims, aren't so much, if you understand what I'm saying. I think the best response to attacks like these, whether they're in Paris or anywhere else, is a sort of renewed vigilance without terror or paranoia, a social tolerance without moral blindness, and an independence and individuality without irresponsibility.
Mal Fletcher, thanks very much for your time.